The galaxy had never known a crisis like this. For centuries, it had flourished under the protection of its most powerful factions, thriving in peace and prosperity. But that peace was shattered in an instant. The Cherik Empire, an enemy the galaxy had long feared, had returned. Their ships, sleek and deadly, tore through the stars, consuming worlds in their wake. No one had expected them to strike so soon, and now, it seemed, no one was ready to stop them. On the outer rim of the galaxy, the first signs of destruction appeared. A peaceful world, once rich with life and resources, was suddenly swallowed by fire. The Cherik had attacked without warning, their fleet arriving like a storm, overwhelming every defense. The people of the world didn't have a chance. The planet's last transmission, a single cry for help, was all that remained, a desperate plea that echoed across the stars. As the transmission reached the core systems, the galaxy's leaders convened in a grand hall on the neutral station of Terran. Representatives from every major race and empire gathered, their faces grim, their minds filled with dread. No one had expected the Cherik to be this powerful. Their weapons were unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. Energy cannons that could obliterate entire cities with a single blast. Their ships were faster than anything the galaxy scientists had developed, and their warriors fought with a savage precision that made even the most seasoned generals uneasy. The council room was filled with heated debate. Some argued for immediate retaliation, others for a cautious approach, but it was clear that the galaxy was divided. There was no unity in their response, and worse, no real plan. The Cherik were relentless, and with each passing day, they gained more ground. No one knew how to stop them. In the midst of the chaos, a voice broke through the noise, a quiet, steady voice that carried authority even in its calmness. It was from the communications officer at the far end of the room. "Sir," the officer spoke, a tremor in his voice. "We've received an unexpected signal. It's coming from Earth." The room fell silent. Earth. The name stirred memories of a world long forgotten. It had been centuries since the human race had disappeared from the galactic stage. Once, humanity had been seen as a powerful force, capable of great strength and destruction, but their fleets had vanished after the Great Silence. For hundreds of years, Earth had been nothing more than a myth, a distant memory that few believed still existed. The council members exchanged uneasy glances. What was this? Why was Earth sending a signal now, in the middle of the galaxy's most desperate hour? "Put it through," the commander of the council said, his voice low. The screen flickered to life, revealing a single, static image, a faded emblem of humanity's ancient warships, the symbol of a time when Earth's forces had commanded respect across the stars. The message was short but clear. "We are coming." A chill ran through the room. The leaders of the galaxy, already on edge from the Cherik invasion, now found themselves faced with a question no one had prepared for. Could Earth still have the power they once wielded? Were they capable of fighting back, of making a difference in this war? For a moment, no one spoke. Then, a low murmur began to rise. "We thought they were gone," one representative said, his voice heavy with disbelief. "How can they help us now?" "We don't have a choice," another replied, her eyes narrowing. "The Cherik are crushing us. If humanity still has the strength we remember, we must accept their help." The silence that followed was thick with uncertainty. The Cherik Empire had attacked with overwhelming force. They had destroyed one of the galaxy's most peaceful worlds, and the shockwaves of that destruction had rippled through the galaxy, throwing every system into chaos. The galaxy's mightiest factions, who had once felt untouchable, were now scrambling for a response. But humanity, could they truly stand against such a threat? The officers exchanged glances as they debated their options. Some called for a cautious approach, send a few ships to investigate, perhaps even test Earth's readiness. Others pushed for immediate action, fearing the Cherik would continue their rampage if they were not stopped. Despite the uncertainty, one thing became clear. The galaxy needed humanity now more than ever. and the response from Earth would determine the fate of billions of lives across the stars. The room quieted as the officer from Earth's fleet spoke up. His face appeared on the screen, looking tired but resolute. "This is Captain Michael Hayes of the Terran Fleet," he said. "We've been in deep isolation for centuries, but we've been watching. We've seen the Chirrut attack, and we've been waiting for the moment when the galaxy would need us. That moment is now." His voice, steady and filled with an undeniable strength, cut through the tension in the room. For a brief moment, the galaxy's leaders felt something they hadn't felt in years: hope. Captain Hayes continued, his words firm. "Humanity has returned, and we're coming. Prepare yourselves. The Chirrut will regret ever underestimating us." The transmission ended. The council room was silent for a long moment. Finally, one of the older leaders spoke, his voice shaking but filled with a new sense of determination. "We cannot afford to hesitate. Humanity is our last hope. If they are truly coming, we must be ready." And so, the call for help had been answered. The galaxy, once filled with uncertainty and fear, now had a new force on its side. A force forged in the fires of war and survival: humanity. But as the leaders gathered their resources, one thought lingered in their minds. Was humanity truly ready to face the Chirrut, and would their response be enough to turn the tide? The galaxy had never experienced a moment like this. The Chirrut Empire, a force of unimaginable power, had cast a dark shadow over every civilization, burning worlds with ruthless efficiency. Entire planets had fallen within hours, their once thriving societies reduced to nothing more than ash and ruins. The great factions, once proud and confident in their strength, had been reduced to a fearful, desperate alliance. All their fleets, their advanced technologies, and their armies seemed useless against the might of the Chirrut. For weeks, the galaxy's most powerful leaders met in urgent conferences, trying to form a united strategy. But as they sat in their grand halls, staring at holographic maps, the weight of the situation was clear. They were losing. One world after another had fallen, and the Chirrut showed no signs of stopping. The factions argued endlessly, but there was no solution. The best minds in the galaxy had no answers. The galaxy's last hope seemed to rest with its most distant and forgotten member: Earth. Captain Michael Hayes, the commander of the recently reawakened Terran fleet, sat in the briefing room aboard the flagship Aegis, staring at the vastness of space through the reinforced windows. His eyes were heavy with the weight of responsibility. He had never imagined that his return to galactic affairs would come under such dire circumstances. Humanity had been in isolation for centuries, hidden from the galaxy after the Great Silence. The universe had long moved on without them, believing Earth and its people were gone. But now, the desperation of the galaxy had pulled them back into the fray. Hayes knew that Earth's military might, though powerful, was not what it once was. Their fleets had been dormant for hundreds of years, and the technology, though still potent, had fallen behind that of the galaxy's greatest civilizations. But one thing humanity had always had was a fierce, unyielding will to survive. They had faced destruction before, on their own homeworld, and had fought back. The same spirit that had carried them through wars of old now burned in Hayes and his crew. Humanity might be outnumbered, but they would not go down without a fight. The captain's thoughts were interrupted by the voice of his tactical officer, who had been monitoring the situation. "Captain," the officer called, "the Chirrut are advancing on the Relentless system. It's the next in their path. We're their only chance." Hayes stood, his back straightening with the weight of the moment. He could feel the weight of history on his shoulders. For centuries, Earth had been forgotten by the stars. But now, they were the galaxy's last hope. "We have no time to waste," Hayes said. His voice was calm, but filled with authority. "Prepare the fleet. We'll make the jump to Relentless at once." As the fleet began its preparations, Hayes couldn't help but think of the people of Earth, their strength, their courage, and the legacy they carried. He thought of the ancient warships, the long-forgotten designs that had been hidden away, awaiting this moment. Humanity had the firepower to stop the Cherik. They just had to prove it to the galaxy, and to themselves. The galaxy had lost hope. Humanity had not. Within hours, the fleet of human warships exited hyperspace over the Relentless system. The sight that greeted them was horrifying. The once beautiful planet now looked like a scar on the face of space, its surface scorched and smoking from the Cherik bombardment. Their warships hovered above it, sending waves of destruction down to the surface with terrifying precision. Hayes stood on the command deck of the Aegis, watching the display unfold. His heart raced, but there was no fear in his chest, only determination. The fleet was ready. The Cherik would regret underestimating humanity. "Open fire," Hayes commanded. Immediately, the fleet's weapons came to life. The Terran warships unleashed a barrage of energy blasts that lit up the dark space like a storm of fire. The power of the human fleet was immediate and overwhelming. The Cherik ships, caught off guard by the ferocity of the assault, tried to retaliate, but they were unprepared for the ruthless precision of the Terran fleet. One by one, Cherik warships fell, their shields shattering like glass, their systems overloaded by the concentrated human firepower. It was unlike anything the galaxy had seen before, relentless, unforgiving, and brutal. The battle was just beginning, but humanity had already sent a message. They had returned, and they were not afraid. Captain Hayes watched the chaos unfold, but he knew this was just the beginning. The Cherik would not be easily defeated. They would retaliate with everything they had, and the galaxy would continue to burn unless humanity could prove itself, not just as warriors, but as the galaxy's last defenders. The stakes had never been higher. The question was, could they win this fight, or would the galaxy be lost forever? Only time would tell. But for now, the first battle was humanity's to claim. And that was enough to send a message. Earth had not forgotten, and it was ready to fight. The battle raged on above the Relentless system, and Captain Michael Hayes could feel the pulse of the fight in every fiber of his being. The Aegis rocked with the force of enemy fire, but the human ship held strong, its shields glowing brightly as they absorbed the punishment. Around them, humanity's warships fought with brutal precision, cutting through the Cherik fleet like a blade through paper. The Cherik, once so confident in their dominance, were now scrambling, reacting rather than attacking, unable to adjust to the sheer force and unpredictability of Earth's military strategy. Hayes had seen this kind of warfare before, humanity's ingenuity and unyielding resolve in the face of impossible odds. Despite the fact that the Terran ships were outnumbered, they fought with the ferocity of cornered predators. Every shot, every maneuver, every tactic was designed to crush the invaders' morale, and it was working. The Cherik were not accustomed to facing such fierce resistance. They had never encountered an opponent like humanity. But Hayes knew this was only the beginning. The Cherik might have been caught off guard by the sudden appearance of humanity's fleet, but they were not so easily defeated. He had seen the intelligence reports. He knew the Cherik would adapt. They would come back harder. They would throw everything they had at Earth's fleet. The human advantage of surprise would not last long. A sudden alert flashed on the screen in front of him. A new wave of Cherik ships, larger, faster, and more advanced than their previous forces, had entered the system. Their technology had been upgraded, and they were now approaching the battlefield in full force. Hayes could feel the tension in the air, the weight of what was to come. "Captain," the tactical officer said, "they've adapted. New ships, heavily armed, coming in fast." Hayes clenched his jaw. The stakes had just risen. But humanity had always survived by adapting, and that was something the Cherik would soon learn. "Prepare the fleet for evasive maneuvers. Focus all fire on their flagship. We need to break their command structure," Hayes ordered, his voice unwavering. As the Terran fleet reorganized, the new wave of Cherik ships came into view, sleek and monstrous, their surfaces glinting under the light of distant stars. They launched a barrage of missiles, each one capable of tearing apart even the toughest of shields. The Aegis was struck hard, and alarms blared throughout the ship, but Hayes knew better than to panic. His crew was ready. They had trained for moments like this. Countermeasures deployed. The officer reported. Shields holding. Returning fire. The human ships retaliated with a barrage of their own, and the battle intensified. The Cherik flagship, massive and intimidating, took the brunt of the attack, but it didn't fall. It was armored heavily, designed to withstand hits that would destroy most vessels. But it had one weakness, its communication relay. If they could disable that, they could throw the entire Cherik fleet into chaos. Hayes looked over the tactical map and quickly calculated their chances. There was no time for hesitation. This was the moment they had been waiting for. With a single command, he ordered his fleet to shift focus. All ships target the relay on the Cherik flagship. We cripple their command. We win this. The Terran ships adjusted their fire, concentrating all their power on a single vulnerable spot. The Cherik flagship's shields flared, but they could not withstand the intensity of the human onslaught. Slowly, the relay began to fail, and the Cherik command began to falter. As the flagship's communications began to go dark, chaos erupted within the enemy fleet. The once coordinated attack now descended into disarray as the Cherik ships struggled to communicate and coordinate. It was exactly what humanity had been counting on. Hayes gave the order to press the attack. Finish it. Break their lines. With their leadership disrupted, the remaining Cherik ships began to fall apart. Terran warships moved in, cutting down enemy vessels with deadly efficiency. The battle that had seemed so one-sided in favor of the invaders was now turning into a desperate struggle for survival. Humanity, with their sheer will to fight, had shifted the momentum of the war in their favor. As the final Cherik ship was destroyed, the surviving forces began to retreat, limping away from the battlefield, their morale shattered. Hayes stood at the front of the command deck, watching the empty space where the battle had unfolded. The Cherik were not finished, he knew. They would regroup, they would retaliate. But for now, humanity had sent a powerful message to the galaxy. Earth was back, and it was a force to be reckoned with. The room erupted in cheers, but Hayes remained focused. He had seen the reports from the outer rim, where the Cherik's devastation continued unchecked. This victory was significant, yes, but the war was far from over. Humanity's response had been a warning to the Cherik, but it was also a signal to the rest of the galaxy. Earth was not just a forgotten world, it was the galaxy's last hope. "We have a long road ahead," Captain Hayes muttered to himself, his eyes fixed on the stars. "But we've taken the first step." The victory above Rallner had sent shockwaves throughout the galaxy, but Captain Michael Hayes knew that it was just a brief reprieve in a war that had only begun. Despite humanity's triumph, the Cherik Empire was far from defeated. Their forces would regroup, and the galaxy would continue to burn under their ruthless expansion. But for the first time in centuries, humanity had shown that it could make a difference. The rest of the galaxy now knew that Earth wasn't just a forgotten world, it was a force to be reckoned with. The Aegis and its fleet had returned to Earth's orbit after the battle. For the first time in weeks, the crew had a moment to breathe, to reflect on what they had just accomplished. The air on the ship was heavy with the weight of their success, but there was also an undeniable sense of unease. The battle was over, but the war was far from won. Hayes stood on the bridge, staring out at the distant Earth below. It was a peaceful sight, a sharp contrast to the chaos that had just unfolded. Earth had been silent for so long, hiding from the galaxy's affairs. Now, it had re-entered the stage with an undeniable roar. Humanity had proven its worth in the most brutal way possible, with firepower. But Hayes knew better than to get comfortable. The Cherik would be plotting their next move. They would learn from their mistakes and adjust. And Earth's fleets, though powerful, were still small compared to the vast armies of the galactic empires. He needed more time, more allies, and more preparation. But as he looked out over the planet, He knew one thing for certain: humanity would not back down. "Captain," a voice interrupted his thoughts. It was Lieutenant Cole, the communications officer. "We're receiving a transmission from the Galactic Council. They're requesting a meeting." Hayes nodded, his expression hardening. The Galactic Council, a coalition of the galaxy's most powerful factions, had been watching humanity's actions with great interest. They had seen the Terran fleet's unexpected assault on the Cherik and the victory that had followed. But would they offer support? Or would they see humanity as a threat? "Put it through," Hayes said, turning away from the view of Earth and heading to the center of the command deck. The large holographic display flickered to life, showing the faces of the council members, representatives from various galactic races, some familiar, some entirely unknown. Captain Hayes, the lead representative, an alien named Orklar from the Androsian Alliance, said, his deep voice resonating through the speakers. "It seems humanity has earned a place at the table." Hayes raised an eyebrow. "I assume you're referring to our actions above Rallner." "Indeed," Orklar replied. "Your fleet's decisive action has thrown the Cherik off balance. This is unexpected, to say the least. We thought your people were nothing more than a relic of the past. But it seems we were mistaken." "We've always been here," Hayes said, his voice steady. "We've just been waiting for the right time." Waiting for the right time. Another council member, a female Grath from the Scythian Dominion, scoffed. "You've been in hiding for centuries. And now, after one battle, you think you're ready to face the Cherik." "We're ready to do whatever it takes," Hayes replied, his voice firm. "And if we're going to survive this war, we'll need more than just Earth's fleet. We need an alliance. We need to stand together." The council members exchanged uneasy glances. There had been many talks about the Cherik, and many had feared them, but none had truly believed that Earth, after so long in isolation, would be the one to make a stand. But now, with the Cherik seemingly unassailable and humanity's sudden resurgence, things were shifting. The galaxy had underestimated Earth, but they couldn't afford to do so anymore. Orklar leaned forward, his eyes narrowing. "You want an alliance, Captain. You think the galaxy's races will just line up behind Earth. After all the years of isolation, there's too much distrust, too much history between our people." "I understand that," Hayes said, looking each council member in the eye. "But if we don't unite, the Cherik will destroy us all. The time for old grudges is over. If we don't work together, we'll all fall. That's the only truth I see now." The council members fell silent. There was tension in the air. The galaxy had never known true unity. Old rivalries and animosities ran deep, and the wounds of past wars had never fully healed. But now, faced with a common enemy, the impossible might be within reach. "I will speak with my people," Orklar said after a long pause, "and we will see if your words hold any weight." "Good," Hayes replied. "I'll be waiting." As the transmission ended, Hayes stood quietly, contemplating the future. The Cherik were still out there, still a threat, and humanity had no time to waste. This victory was just the first step, and the galaxy's response would shape the course of the war. Would the factions unite behind Earth, or would the old divisions tear them apart? He turned back to the view of Earth, the homeworld that had given humanity its strength. They had been silent for centuries, but now they had a voice again. It was time for the galaxy to listen, and for humanity to prove that it would not be silenced ever again. With that thought, Captain Hayes turned and walked off the bridge, his mind already focused on the battles to come. The war was far from over, but one thing was clear: Earth had found its place in the galaxy once more, and nothing, not even the Cherik, would stand in their way. The war had only just begun, but Captain Michael Hayes felt the weight of humanity's resolve pressing heavily on his shoulders. The initial victory over the Cherik had bought them some time, but Hayes knew it was only a temporary respite. The Cherik Empire would regroup. Their claws would sink deeper into the galaxy, and Earth would have to be ready. Yet, amidst the looming storm, humanity had proven itself, not just as survivors, but as fighters. The galaxy's power dynamics were shifting, and the alliances that would soon form could very well determine the fate of every living being. The Aegis had just completed its repairs after the fierce battle above Relentless, and the crew had taken their first breath of relief in days. Yet Hayes couldn't afford to rest. He stood in the war room aboard the Aegis, alongside the leaders of the human fleet, reviewing tactical data and strategizing the next phase of humanity's involvement in the war. One thing had become clear. If humanity was going to stand a chance, they needed more than just firepower. They needed allies, but those allies would not come easily. The meeting with the Galactic Council had been a turning point. Some members had shown interest, others had been skeptical, but Hayes had gotten their attention. For the first time in a long while, humanity's name was on the lips of powerful galactic figures. Hayes leaned over the holographic map of the galaxy, analyzing the Cherok's movements. The Cherok, though momentarily thrown off balance, had not retreated entirely. Their forces were massing in the farthest reaches of the galaxy, out of the reach of most known civilizations. The Cherok were not simply a military threat, they were a political one. Their fleet alone was formidable, but their influence spread across the galaxy like an infection. The question remained, how could humanity break through that web of power? "Captain," Lieutenant Cole said, snapping Hayes out of his thoughts, "we've received word from the Galactic Council. The Scythian Dominion is willing to meet with us. They want to discuss the terms of a potential alliance." "Good," Hayes replied, his voice firm but measured. "Prepare our representatives. We need to approach this carefully. One misstep, and we lose what little leverage we have." As Cole departed, Hayes ran his fingers through his hair, his eyes still fixed on the map. The Scythian Dominion was a key player. If they could secure their support, it would provide a crucial foothold for Earth in the galactic politics. But Hayes knew that the Scythians would not be easily swayed. They had their own agenda, their own conflicts, and humanity would have to prove it wasn't just a side player in the galaxy's larger struggles. The days following the meeting with the Galactic Council were filled with tense negotiations. The Scythians were slow to make a decision, and other factions like the Androgen Alliance and the Zakar Coalition were hesitant to commit. There was no denying the growing pressure on all sides. The Cherok were a threat to everyone. But the question was, how far were the galaxy's factions willing to go to stop them? And more importantly, how much of their power would they be willing to share with humanity? In the meantime, Earth's military continued its preparations. The fleet, although battle-hardened, needed to expand. New ships were being constructed, soldiers were training, and weapons were being fine-tuned. Humanity's arsenal was rapidly improving, but so was the threat. The Cherok were watching, waiting, and Hayes knew they would strike again when the time was right. Then, on the fourth day after the initial negotiations, the Scythian Dominion made their decision. Captain Hayes sat in the command chair, his hands folded before him, listening to the transmission that had just been received. The face of Orklar, the leader of the Androgen Alliance, appeared on the screen once more, flanked by representatives from the Scythian Dominion. They looked grim, but there was something else in their eyes, a flicker of acknowledgement. "We've decided," Orklar said, his voice heavy with authority. "Humanity will be given a seat at the table. But make no mistake, Captain Hayes, your people must prove themselves. We won't fight your battles for you. You must demonstrate your strength and resolve, or this alliance will be nothing more than a footnote in history." Hayes straightened in his chair. "Understood. We will hold our own." The Scythian representative spoke next, her voice calm but unyielding. "Humanity's bravery at Relentless was impressive, but that's just the beginning. If we are to work together, you must understand the stakes. The Cherok will not stop until they have claimed the entire galaxy. They will destroy everything in their path to achieve that." Hayes met her gaze, his expression hardening. "Then it's time we stop running." The decision had been made. The Scythians, the Androsians, and a handful of other smaller factions had agreed to join forces with humanity. It was not a perfect alliance, and it was far from guaranteed success. But it was a start. Humanity had shown the galaxy that they could fight, and now they had the opportunity to prove they could lead. As Hayes ended the meeting and turned back to the window overlooking Earth, he couldn't help but feel the weight of what lay ahead. The Cherik would come again, and the war would escalate, but Earth's people had always thrived in the face of adversity. The galaxy's decision to unite with them had opened a new chapter in their history. And no matter what came next, humanity would make its mark on the stars. For the first time in a long while, Captain Hayes allowed himself a small, grim smile. Earth had returned. And now, it would show the galaxy that humanity was more than just a survivor. It was a power to be reckoned with. The decision to unite the galaxy against the Cherik Empire had been made, but humanity's true test was only beginning. As Earth's alliances with the Scythians, Androsians, and other galactic factions solidified, Captain Hayes and his fleet found themselves at the crossroads of destiny. The path ahead was uncertain, fraught with danger, and painted with the blood of both allies and enemies alike. Yet, as Hayes stood on the bridge of the Aegis, his mind racing with plans for the upcoming battles, there was a simmering sense of confidence that humanity would change the galaxy's fate. The preparations for the coming war accelerated. The Aegis and its accompanying fleet of ships were being outfitted with the most advanced weapons humanity could produce. New ships were being constructed on Earth's moon and in orbit around the planet, while soldiers, many of whom had only ever known the peace of home, trained day and night, becoming hardened warriors ready to face the galaxy's greatest threats. Hayes had seen the transformations firsthand. The human spirit was unbreakable, and the desperation to defend their homeworld was palpable in every soldier's eyes. But it wasn't just about weapons and strategy. Humanity had earned its seat at the table, but trust among the galaxy's factions was still fragile. There were those who saw Earth's sudden rise as an opportunity to gain more power, while others remained skeptical of human involvement in galactic affairs. Alliances had been forged, but not all the pieces were in place. And humanity's survival in the coming war would depend not just on firepower, but on diplomacy, cunning, and the ability to forge unity out of chaos. Hayes understood that the Cherik were not simply a military threat. They were a force that represented everything the galaxy had come to fear. Their strategy was not just to conquer, but to utterly destroy, erasing worlds and civilizations in their wake. There was no middle ground with them. You either survived, or you became a memory, a forgotten name in the void of space. Earth had already felt the pain of their ambition through the loss of colonies and military outposts. But now, Earth had something they hadn't had before: unity, strength, and a voice in the Galactic Council. One morning, as Hayes paced the bridge of the Aegis, a call came through. It was a distress signal, one of many that had been ignored for far too long. This time, however, it was from a sector closer to Earth. A planet called Nyx, once a thriving colony, had sent out a desperate plea. The Cherik were closing in. This wasn't just another skirmish. It was an extinction-level event. "Captain, we've received a distress signal from Nyx," said Lieutenant Cole, his voice tight with urgency. "The Cherik have already attacked. They're systematically destroying the planet's infrastructure, and it won't be long before they wipe it out entirely." Hayes felt a sharp pang in his chest. Nyx had been a key ally during humanity's initial rise, a planet that had provided technological support and resources. The loss of Nyx would be a major blow not just for Earth, but for the fragile alliance they had started to form with other galactic races. "We can't just sit here and wait," Hayes said, his voice cold with resolve. "Prepare the fleet. We're jumping to Nyx. We're not letting another world fall to the Cherik." The orders were quickly relayed, and the crew scrambled into action. The Aegis was the first to break orbit, its engines roaring to life as it entered hyperspace, followed closely by the rest of the human fleet. They weren't alone. The Scythians, Androsians, and a few smaller factions had offered support, though their fleets weren't as large as humanity's. But together, they made a formidable force. As the fleet arrived at Nyx, the devastation was immediate and overwhelming. The once beautiful world had become a nightmare, with vast craters marking the impact zones where Cherik bombardment had struck. Their fleet hovered in the distance, waiting to finish the job. The Cherik's battle cruisers were massive, their designs like a terrifying fusion of organic and technological horror, moving with deadly efficiency. "This is it," Hayes muttered under his breath. "We either make our stand here, or we lose everything." The battle was ferocious. The combined human and allied forces engaged the Cherik in a brutal assault, with humanity's ships leading the charge. Hayes had never felt such intensity in a battle before, and it was clear that this wasn't just another fight for survival. This was a statement. Earth would not kneel before the Cherik. They would stand, and they would fight back. The initial wave of Cherik ships, massive and unrelenting, surged forward, their weapons pounding against the human fleet's shields. But humanity's new technology, developed after years of covert research and battle experience, was starting to show its true power. Earth's weapons were precise and devastating, taking out Cherik warships one after another. Their advanced snipers, long-range missile systems, and newly developed energy shields gave humanity an edge they had never had before. But the Cherik were relentless, and it soon became clear that this battle would not be won quickly. Their numbers were overwhelming, and they fought with a ferocity that matched humanity's own. "Captain, we're taking heavy fire," Lieutenant Cole reported, his voice tight with stress. "If we don't get more reinforcements, we'll be overrun." Hayes knew they were reaching their limits. The combined fleet had already taken heavy losses, and Nyx was on the brink of collapse. But then, something unexpected happened. From behind the Cherik lines, an unmarked fleet of ships appeared, human vessels, led by none other than the Earth's remaining colonies. They had come to the rescue. The relief was immediate, and the battle shifted in humanity's favor. The reinforcements proved to be the turning point. With their combined strength, the fleets began to push back the Cherik forces. The battle was still far from over, but humanity had shown once again that they would never give up. When the final shots were fired and the last Cherik warship was obliterated, the galaxy breathed a collective sigh of relief. Nyx had been saved, but it had come at a cost. Earth's fleet had taken significant damage, and the battle had left scars on all involved. The Cherik were not gone, not yet, but the message had been sent. Humanity was not just a force to be reckoned with, it was a force of nature. As Captain Hayes stood among the ruins of the battle, looking out over the remains of the Nyx system, he realized something crucial. Humanity had awakened. The galaxy would never forget the day Earth had fought back, and no matter the cost, humanity would continue to stand, unbroken and unyielding, against whatever the Cherik or anyone else threw at them. For the first time, humanity had not only responded to the galaxy's call for help, but they had done so with overwhelming fury. The tides of war had shifted, and Earth was at